M Night Shyamalan was a name that at one point in time represented a highly respected filmmaking master, a trailblazing visionary, and one of the brightest rising stars in Hollywood. But today, that name has lost all the respect that it once carried. Today, M Night Shyamalan is treated like an embarrassment, a laughingstock who is way past his prime. How could one man go from making some of the greatest films ever made to some of the most embarrassing in less than a decade? All that and more is what we seek to discover today. Welcome to Director Detective, the new series where we take a look at a troubling or problematic director's career, see what we can learn, and maybe share a few laughs along the way. On the chopping block today is M Night Shyamalan and how he went from master to amateur.
So it's not particularly well written.
I see dead people.
Reviews in America have been pretty harsh.
Well, sir, I don't know what's going on with me and the critics of the United States, I gotta tell you.
Need a second, okay? Why can't anybody give me a goddamn second?
They just don't get you.
They've never got me, and it's getting worse.
Maybe 13, may not live in the hood, may not carry no chrome, may not be allowed a cell phone at dinner.
Hitchcock and Kurosawa and Stanley Kubrick, these are like my teachers.
What? No.
You know, they're in a normal process,
My name is Ong, and I'm the Avatar.
Look, and I'll see a painting, and it'll all add to this. It'll seem almost magically like the painting I saw is telling me something directly about this idea.
In order to first understand why M. Night is a laughingstock today, we must first go back and understand why he became so popular in the first place.
Here are the nominees for Best Achievement in Directing. M. Night Shyamalan for The Sixth Sense.
Dinner is not ready.
For Best Picture tonight, here are the nominees. The Sixth Sense.
You're a stuttering Stanley.
Recently, I went back and rewatched every single M. Night movie, a Shyamalan-a-thon, if you will. M. Night rose to prominence in 1999 after getting universal praise for his iconic hit film, Stuart Little. Okay, it was more so because of The Sixth Sense, I guess. The Sixth Sense is not just a regular horror movie. It's a horror masterpiece that shows that M. Night knew exactly what he was doing. It has a strong focus on the character drama. It's not just about a little kid who sees spooky ghosts doing scary things. It's also about a man who's realizing that his marriage is falling apart. It's about a family that's realizing that they're in a very difficult time period in their lives and learning how to come closer because of those issues. This movie was a huge success. It wasn't just that it was nominated for a bunch of Academy Awards, it was also that it was the second highest grossing film of 1999. That's right. Somewhere out there's a list where number 2 is M. Night Shyamalan and number 1 is Jar Jar Binks. Could you imagine today if a slow-paced horror film with deep character drama and lots of these dramatic themes was the second highest grossing film of a year? It seems unfathomable now. This movie is so insanely influential, it feels so modern. If you haven't seen this movie, you might be thinking that you don't want to watch it because it's old and old movies are boring. Well, guess what? This movie feels like it came out yesterday. Do you like Hereditary? Well, guess what? You would like The Sixth Sense. Do you like The Babadook? Well, guess what? You would like The Sixth Sense. Did you like Us? Well, guess what? You need to watch better movies, but you would still like The Sixth Sense. M. Night didn't just trip and fall and accidentally make a good movie. This movie shows that he was a genuinely creative person with lots of talent. M. Night made one of the best movies of all time. He was called the next Spielberg. Yes, 1999 was the year that M. Night and Steven Spielberg were both still directors with a lot of respect. This movie started 2 M. Night staples that would continue throughout a majority of his career. First off, there's the M. Night cameo. You see, M. Night, his favorite director growing up was Alfred Hitchcock. Birdman. Fat Birdman was his favorite director growing up, and you see, Fat Birdman had a cameo in almost all of his movies, and M. Night took a lot of influence from that. In The Sixth Sense, M. Night plays a doctor that the main characters go to. It's so subtle. If you didn't know who M. Night was, you wouldn't even notice that this was the director in this role. It's a really good cameo. But the most iconic part of The Sixth Sense was the twist, Shyamalan's staple. You see, the twist of The Sixth Sense was so good that it's now considered to be the best plot twist in all of film history. Us realizing that Bruce Willis was dead the whole time made complete sense. And when you go back and rewatch the movie, it's even better the second time because you realize that the movie doesn't cheat. After Bruce Willis gets shot in the first scene, no characters interact with him aside from Malcolm. It's a really genius twist that took a lot of pre-planning, and it paid off so well.
A lot of people think that The Sixth Sense is where M. Night's great movies stop, but honestly, Unbreakable is a really underrated movie that's every bit as good as The Sixth Sense.
Unbreakable is similar to The Sixth Sense in the fact that it is a genre film that focuses on family drama over the spectacle. It's not just about strong, funny CGI man punching another super strong, mean CGI man. It's the story of a man who feels like he's never accomplished anything in his entire life, finally finding the motivation to realizing his true potential. Basically, it's about Bruce Willis who has superpowers. He's essentially Superman, but he's never realized that he's had superpowers. He's just noticed throughout his entire life that he's never been seriously injured or sick, and it slowly makes him come to the realization that he might have more potential than he initially realized. And the initial incident of this is that he's the only survivor of a violent train crash. Sam Jackson plays one of the coolest performances in his entire career. And listen, I know this movie isn't as popular as The Sixth Sense, but I think it's every bit as good as The Sixth Sense. I don't want to spoil this movie too much because I know a lot of you probably haven't seen it. But in a world of oversaturated superhero films where a lot of them are exactly the same and really boring and lame and use the same type of humor that makes me just cringe every time, Unbreakable is just such a breath of fresh air. It is a one-of-a-kind film in a genre that's almost completely devoid of them. Once again, M. Night has his two staples in it, a twist and a cameo. I'm not going to tell you what the twist is because most of you probably haven't seen it and I don't want to ruin it for you. But his cameo is that he plays a security guard at a baseball stadium. It's not too crazy, not too in your face. Good cameo. Good job, M. Night. You did good again.
I spent a third of my life in a hospital bed with nothing else to do but read. I have something called osteogenesis imperfecta.
Some guys have all the luck. I was born with glass bones and paper skin.
I hope you liked that movie, because it's all downhill from here.
Some people say that Signs was M. Night's first real disaster of a movie, and I disagree. Signs has a lot to offer. It has great cinematography, the music is incredible, and the acting is awesome. Joaquin Phoenix is one of the best actors alive. He gives a great performance in all of his movies. And also Mel Gibson's in this movie, and he's pretty good in it. For you young kids who don't know, Mel Gibson is a guy who was in a bunch of good movies and then did nothing else. Bruce Willis isn't in this movie. I guess he was too busy being an alcoholic somewhere else. Once again, this movie is a genre film with a huge focus on family rather than the spectacle. It's an alien invasion movie, but it's not just about a bunch of green men kidnapping a bunch of people and their UFOs. It's also about a family coming to terms with the fact that the mother figure is no longer there. It's about a man coming to terms with the death of his wife and the fact that he needs to raise a family without her. It's about a man having a crisis of faith and not really knowing how to feel about his own religion. This movie has a lot to offer. I think it's way better than a lot of people give it credit for. The way this guy's wife dies is so insanely funny to me. So I guess she was just going for a walk and she got hit by a car, but the way the car hits her in the movie logic is that the car hits her and then pins her body to a tree, and the car just so happens to not roll back or anything, and so it cuts the bottom half of her body off. But the way the car is pinning her to the tree is keeping her alive just long enough so that Mel Gibson can have one final conversation with her. It is so stupid, and then the dialogue that they have is so bad. It's so funny to me. She's just like, tell the kids to play Monopoly. Burp, 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 I'm dead.
I was just taking a walk before dinner.
You love walks.
You like walks? The cameo from M. Night is a little iffy. Basically, M. Night plays a side character where he's the guy who got into the car accident that killed Mel Gibson's wife. This cameo is a little iffy, M. Night. I feel like this cameo is putting himself in a bit of a self-important position. Gee, I hope that isn't foreshadowing or anything.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
This movie is pretty good for the most part, but most people consider it to be a pretty huge step down from the previous two films, and I would agree with them. I think that this is a solid movie, but where it loses people most is with its ending. You see, M. Night had this reputation at this point, given the notoriety of Unbreakable and The Sixth Sense, that he was the guy who made amazing plot twists, and I think M. Night kind of tied his identity with that notoriety. So in this movie, he just felt like he had to do one. The twist of this movie was the moment that started M. Night's downfall in the eye of the public. It was so alienating.
Did I really say alienate when reviewing the Alien movie? God, this video sucks.
Basically what the twist is that the aliens that are invading Earth die when water is dumped on them. Water is poisonous to these aliens. And I think that the first reason why this twist doesn't work, I think this twist is so dumb, but it doesn't work because it requires a lot from the audience to buy into it. Are we really meant to believe that the aliens who were smart enough to master space travel went to the planet that was covered in something poisonous to them? Has there not been a rainstorm during this entire invasion that made them decide to leave? When the plot twist of The Sixth Sense happened, and you see Bruce Willis drop that ring, you immediately understand what's happening and what it all means. The plot twist doesn't need to be explained to you because you just get it. Nobody needs to play mental gymnastics in order to explain what the twist is or why it works. The twist in Signs requires so much guessing that it's really bad for the movie-going experience. You're watching this plot twist happen and you're left wondering, wait, if water kills them, isn't there water in the atmosphere? Wouldn't that also hurt them? And what are they made out of that makes water hurt them? Why is water hurting them? And why did it take this long for the humans to realize that water hurts them? And I don't want to be thinking about all this stuff when I'm just trying to think about the movie. The second reason, in my opinion, that this twist really doesn't work is that it doesn't really feel like it has an impact on the movie. This twist can be completely removed and the movie doesn't change at all. I feel like with the last two films, you go back and you rewatch them and you have this new perspective because of the plot twist, and it changes the entire movie and it makes them even better. You see all these hints for the plot twist and you see how it really permeates the story leading up to that twist happening. As to where with Signs, that's not the case. You watch this whole movie again and you realize the twist doesn't change anything. The movie is exactly the same without the twist as it is with it, and I think that that's not a good way to implement a twist like this. Overall, the ending of a movie is important. It leaves a lasting impact on the people who watch it. You can have a pretty okay superhero film with a really exciting ending and it leaves people leaving the theater thinking that the movie was the best thing ever made, even if it wasn't. On the opposite end of that spectrum, you can have a pretty solid movie with a disappointing ending that leaves people thinking that the whole movie was worse than it really was. It can really sour everyone's view on the film, and I think that's what's happened with Signs. I think this movie has a lot to offer, it's just a considerable step down from Unbreakable and The Sixth Sense.
There are people who say that The Village is M. Night Shyamalan's first real disaster. And once again, I completely disagree. The Village was an insane mixed bag of good things and bad things that I can't really call it a terrible movie.
You see, every technical aspect of The Village is amazing because of the sheer amount of talented people who worked on this movie. Firstly, the film was shot by Roger Deakins, and it looks amazing. Secondly, the score by James Newton Howard was so good that it got nominated for an Academy Award. Also, the actors in this movie are so insanely talented. Once again, Joaquin Phoenix is here and he's amazing. Also, there's Sigourney Weaver and Adrian Brody and Bryce Dallas Howard in her first movie ever. No, Bruce Willis isn't in this movie either. I guess Bruce Willis is done with M Night Shyamalan now. But it's okay because Joaquin Phoenix from Signs returned to be in this movie. Friendship with Bruce Willis ended. Now Joaquin Phoenix is my best friend. The Village's issues stem from two major things. One, the advertising, and two, several aspects of the story that are just flat out dumb. Firstly, the advertising. Watch the trailer of this movie. It'll get you so fucking hyped. It seems like the best movie ever made. The advertising made it seem like a 19th century horror movie where a bunch of monsters are terrorizing this village and its people. And then you watch the movie and it is a slow, dull, boring movie that's more of a romantic drama with some elements of horror. False advertising like this is gonna piss off a lot of people that are watching the movie. This is one of the most dishonest advertising campaigns I've ever seen.
What does the M stand for in M Night? It stands for my nuts.
The plot of this movie is basically that Bryce Dallas Howard and Joaquin Phoenix are in love, and they're in this 19th century village with a bunch of monsters that are in the woods surrounding the village that would occasionally terrorize them. They can't leave the village because if they do, they don't know what kind of dangers are in the woods that these monsters have. And then one night, Joaquin Phoenix gets stabbed, and Bryce Dallas Howard realizes that the only medicine that can save his life is in a village far away from the village that they live in, so she needs to leave the cozy comfort of where they live and venture out into the monster-infested woods. When I explain that plot, it sounds like the greatest movie ever made. Like, how amazing is that plot when I just say it out loud? The issue with this plot isn't the ideas that made it, it's with the execution. I don't think that the characters in this movie are all that interesting or complicated. I also don't think that the monsters are very intimidating or mysterious at all. I just am not scared by anything in this movie. But the biggest issue with this movie is without a doubt its ending. I guess M. Night heard all the complaints about the twist in Signs and he was like, alright, that twist was unnecessary, it was pretty stupid, I get it. You guys don't want me to have a twist in this movie, so there won't be a twist. It'll have 2 twists! That's right, M. Night's first double plot twist. The first twist is that the monsters that are terrorizing these people are not actually monsters at all. Instead, it's the village elders who are dressed in suits to disguise themselves as monsters in order to persuade anyone from leaving the village. Much like the plot of this movie, when I just say it out loud, it sounds like a great twist, but it's with the execution that it falls flat. In Unbreakable and in Sixth Sense, you can rewatch those movies and it makes complete sense knowing the information that the twist gives you. But with The Village and this first twist, it just doesn't work. The movie has a bunch of plot holes because of this twist. You have to wonder, how and why are these village elders skinning animals and leaving the animal skins all over the village? Also, why and how are they making these monster noises? It doesn't make any sense. Also, if someone were to punch one of the monsters, wouldn't it just knock out one of these frail elderly people and expose this whole ruse? I'd punch an old person. I mean, we're led to believe that they've been doing this for years. Not once did any able-bodied person punch one of these monsters. I find that really hard to believe. This first twist opens up a bunch of plot holes and it's kind of stupid. But if you think this twist is stupid and unnecessary, well, guess what, baby? Because strap yourself in, the second twist of this movie is so indefensibly stupid that it might make your fucking head explode. So it turns out that this movie that's presented to look like it's in the 19th century is actually taking place in modern day. This twist doesn't work because it's so goddamn stupid. If you think the twist of Signs made you ask a bunch of unnecessary questions, well, this twist is way worse than that. It's so complicated and so convoluted that it makes the twist of Signs look like a fucking masterpiece. Well, guess what, baby? M. Night has a cameo in this movie too, and he's the police chief explaining to one of the patrolmen how and why they set up walls around this village to try to keep everyone in this village from realizing that they weren't actually in the 19th century. This is literally the writer-director of the movie looking into the camera and explaining the plot twist to the audience. It goes against Show Don't Tell so poorly, and it comes off like M. Night's really insecure about this twist. Like, he's already coming up with a bunch of criticisms people are gonna have about the twist, and instead of just not having this element of the movie be in it, he's just looking into the camera and counter-arguing all these criticisms that you could possibly have. It's like he's looking at you and being like, "What are you, fucking stupid? You don't understand my art? Stop criticizing me!"
See? There was a twist.
I think if I were to go with M. Night's first real disaster, it would be Lady in the Water.
In 2005, M. Night broke the glitchless any percent speedrun world record for fastest time to go from making a masterpiece to a complete disaster, with just 5 years' time, absolutely shattering the previous record, held by gamer Steven Spielberg of 20 years. Lady in the Water is one of the most baffling movies I've ever seen. I've seen this movie like twice, and I still don't really understand what it's about. I dare you to read the Wikipedia plot synopsis without having a stroke. So Paul Giamatti finds out that his pool is a portal to another dimension. Bryce Dallas Howard emerges from the portal as a character named Story. Yes, you heard that right, the goddamn bitch's name is Story. Monsters are coming out of the pool that want to kill Story, but Story can kind of predict the future, but only say it in like ominous movie lines to other people. And it's heavily implied that she's on the autism spectrum, but it's like movie autism, so it's not like real life human being autism. It's some weird version of it.
There's a storm coming. I am scared.
It's okay to be scared.
Joaquin Phoenix isn't in this movie. I guess he broke up with M. Night to go win Oscars with someone else.
We feel entitled to artificially inseminate a cow, and when she gives birth, we steal her baby, and then we take her milk that's intended for a calf, and we put it in our coffee.
But don't worry, because Bryce Dallas Howard returns for this movie, so I guess she is M. Night's new boyfriend. You know, for a movie called Lady in the Water, it's kind of disappointing that the lady only spends one scene in the water. More like Lady Near the Water. It has that stupid horror movie cliche where the white protagonists go to a racial minority who just so happens to know everything about the supernatural entities that are plaguing them. There's this scene where Paul Giamatti holds his breath for like 4 goddamn minutes. The idea of a fully mentally capable adult taking advantage of a severely mentally handicapped person for romantic reasons is gross. The idea that it's portrayed as a romantic or sexy thing in this movie is even grosser. And the fact that this movie does this, despite being based on a bedtime story that M. Night told to his kids, is so gross that saying it out loud makes me want to take a shower.
There's a lot to unpack here.
Real Father of the Year material over here, right guys? One thing that just shocks me while watching this movie is just how cheap it looks and feels. The whole movie has only a few locations and a really small cast. Look, there's nothing wrong with making a low-budget movie. Tons of my favorite movies are ones that push the boundaries of what a small budget can do. So, I just want you guys, everyone out there watching this, to take a guess at how much this movie costs to make by looking at what you're seeing on screen. What do you think? $5 million? $6 million? Maybe $10 million? No. This movie cost $70 million to make! Where did it all go? Why does it look like this? When adjusting for inflation, you could have used that money to fund both Paddington movies. For the movie to be this expensive and look this cheap is flat out unacceptable. What did you do, M. Night? Well, let me tell you what he did. Do you see this apartment complex? This was built for the movie. They didn't rent out an apartment complex to film it. They built one. Why? This is the dumbest waste of money in film history until Justice League's mustache incident. M. Night has a long history of being accused of pretentiousness. I have no idea where those accusations started, but they had to have been popularized by this movie. And it's all because of M. Night's cameo. To call this a cameo is an understatement. M. Night plays the character who is a writer who has been chosen by God to not be recognized in his time, and then his writings will later be used to influence the world and usher in an era of peace. That's right. If you don't get this movie, God decided it, and later on the generations in the future will understand it and they will appreciate M. Night's genius. You're the dummy for not getting Lady in the Water. This might be the most pretentious thing I've seen in any movie. It's hilarious. It shows a complete lack of self-awareness and ego that this guy had at the time, and he did have a big ego at the time. He quit working for Disney because they didn't want him to make this movie, and then he went to another studio. Every movie before this was a Disney-made movie. They let him do what he wanted back then. Disney was a cool company back then. I guess they weren't completely evil yet, and they gave him creative freedom for his previous movies, but for this movie, they wouldn't. And I hate to side with Disney against an artist for once, but I can see why they didn't want him to make it. This was M. Night's first financial failure. None of his movies before this ever lost money. This is the most confusing trilogy I've ever seen.
Crispy bacon. Music score programming. Crispy bacon. Crispy bacon. Is anyone else seeing this?
Oh wow, look! An entire tray of hot dogs! You know, hot dogs get a bad rap. This is a mukbang video now. I'm only doing mukbangs from here on out. That's a channel update. I'm gonna get way fatter, I'm gonna talk a lot of shit about other YouTubers, and then I'm gonna keep eating for 4 hours in one video.
The Happening is the third best So Bad It's Good movie I have ever seen. After, you know, Black Christmas 2019, that's second place, and first place is of course Wish Upon. So, the reason why The Happening is so hilarious is because of the deaths are just so funny. You see, the plot of this movie is that there's a plague sweeping the world where everyone is compelled to kill themselves. And it's all in these, like, funny Rube Goldberg-esque style of ways to die. This is probably the worst dialogue of any M. Night movie, and it is so funny, especially because the delivery of the actors is so bad.
We can't just stand here as uninvolved observers.
I need a second, okay?
You should be more interested in science, Jake. You know why? Because your face is perfect.
Sir, we lost contact.
With whom?
I don't know what M. Night did with the actors in this movie, but they all gave the worst performances ever. Look at Mark Wahlberg and Zooey Deschanel's face in any frame of this movie, and it is always hilarious. Some of the dialogue is so bizarre you would think that the dialogue was written by the aliens and signs. They have this weird fetish about talking about real human food, but not actually talking about it how any human would.
We're packing hot dogs for the road. You know, hot dogs get a bad rap. Got a cool shape, they got protein.
Why are you so obsessed with hot dogs?
Why are you eyeing my lemon drink?
Why are you calling it lemon drink? It's just called lemonade! Call it lemonade! Bryce Dallas Howard unfortunately does not return to be in this movie. What could have possibly made her decide to do that? But this movie easily has one of the worst twists ever. It's so funny. The plot twist of this movie is that the plants conspired to cause all the humans to kill themselves. Yup, the plants are releasing a gas that makes people kill themselves. I love when movies have subtle symbolism about ecological social issues. But my favorite part about this movie is the cameo. Because you might be watching this movie and you get to this part of this video and you might be thinking, Rich, I watched The Happening like 4 times when I was drunk, and I know M. Night doesn't have a cameo in this movie. So checkmate, dumb internet movie guy. But here's the thing. He does have a cameo in this movie. You see, Mark Wahlberg's wife is cheating on him with a guy named Joe. Joe leaves her a voicemail at one point in the movie. And then, when you look in the credits, you see M. Night is listed as being Joe. That's right. Zooey Deschanel in this movie is married to Mark Wahlberg and cheating on him with M. Night Shyamalan. That's right. M. Night's gonna fuck Mark Wahlberg's wife. He's gonna fuck your wife. He's gonna fuck my wife. M. Night's gonna fuck all of our wives.
I mean, just as a critic, you're watching them and you can just understand your mind and where you're coming from with this. Especially I love movies that show just how delicate our society is and how just any little kind of event and things can unravel. People don't understand just how delicate it is right now.
Yeah. Those hot dogs sure were good. They were just so salty that I'm thirsty now and I wish I had something to wash down all those delicious hot dogs with. Oh, look at this. Lemon drink.
Alright, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. I'm about to talk about The Last Airbender. What can I say about The Last Airbender that hasn't been said by 1,000 other YouTube channels? I can't say anything new. What am I gonna say? Realistically, what am I gonna say that you haven't already heard 1,000 times? Why are there so many facial close-ups? Why do the characters all pronounce their names wrong? Why did M. Night ruin my childhood? I could say all that, but I'm not going to, because you've heard it. You've already heard it. What can I say? The only thing that I can really say that's a unique observation about this movie is that even if M. Night was still in his prime, I don't even think he would make this movie good. Think about it. M. Night is great at making genre films with family drama at the core, where Bruce Willis has marital issues, and a white blonde boy that he's in charge of helps him realize his full potential. And then there's another dynamic character who's very important to the plot. He was never good at making bubbly Saturday morning cartoons. Why would anyone think that this guy could do this?
That child is being arrested.
For what?
He was bending tiny stones at us from behind a tree. It really hurt.
Look at this. I like that. I don't like that one. That one sucks.
Something about this movie is just profoundly cheap feeling. Somehow it's a $200 million movie, and it still feels like a student film. This is one of the most expensive movies ever made, and it's like no one who worked on it cared or even tried. Look, this movie's hard. I've seen some bad movies. I can have a lot of fun watching bad movies. Wish Upon is a complete disaster, but I've watched it 6 times because I just love a good bad movie, and this movie doesn't even fit that category. It's just profoundly meh. I think if this was the first movie I ever saw, I don't think I'd ever watch another movie again.
Want to see how much I love The Last Airbender? So this is the squad. These are the piggies. So we got Momo, we got Toph, and we got Appa. Here you go, Appa, have a carrot. You deserved it. Here you go, Toph, have a carrot. You deserved it. Here you go, Momo. You can deserve it too. Do you like M. Night Shyamalan?
Fellas, if your girl has beautiful brown skin, a cute smile, and loves to surprise you, that ain't your girl, that's M. Night Shyamalan. After Earth is the strangest M. Night movie in his entire discography. Listen, If you power through watching every M. Night movie over the span of 2 weeks, you'll probably also think that this is the one that stands out as being the least M. Night movie M. Night ever M. Nighted. And when you hear about the behind-the-scenes drama about this movie, it makes a lot of sense. You see, this movie was Will Smith's vanity project. This was a time period in Will Smith's life where he wanted all of his family members to also be A-list celebrities. I was in middle school in the early 2010s, back when Will Smith was on this tirade to make his whole family famous. I don't know if you remember that awful Whip Your Hair pop song, but that was Will Smith's daughter. And then his son Jaden, who's honestly more famous for his weird tweets than he is for his actual performances, just doesn't work in this movie. Will really wanted him to be an A-list actor, and he wanted to send him into blockbuster success. So this movie was Will Smith's attempt at doing that. The problem was Will Smith is one of the most charismatic actors out there. So he couldn't be that charismatic in this movie, because if he was, then more people would pay attention to Will than they would have paid attention to Jaden. So Will Smith is trying to be this reserved, stoic character, and it's so out of his comfort zone. You could tell it's just not natural for him.
There are three possibilities. The first and most likely is that he died in the crash.
You are not being followed. Take a knee.
How does Will Smith and his son not have any charisma on screen together? They're literally related. I don't want to be the guy who's complaining about a child performance, but this performance just is not very good.
And why were you? She called out for you. She called your name. And you weren't there because you never there.
So you have a very inexperienced actor with a very experienced actor who's not doing anything at all being the two lead roles. It's very boring to watch these two on screen in this movie. But other behind the scenes drama is that a lot of people who worked on this movie claim that M. Night didn't really even direct it, and that Will Smith had more to do with the directing than M. Night did. There are some claims that even go as far as saying M. Night only set up a few shots and that Will Smith in this egotistical tirade directed everything else. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me. This doesn't feel like an M. Night movie at all. Even the last Airbender felt more like an M. Night movie than this. M. Night doesn't have any cameos in this movie. He doesn't even have a plot twist. It's not his thing, and I wouldn't be shocked if he didn't really do much. What's funny is at this point his name was so toxic to box office results that they didn't even put his name on the poster or in the trailers. How sad is that?
From 2015 and onward, M. Night seemingly had a small redemption in his own public status. The Dark Ages were over, he just made 4 gigantic failures in a row, and it seemed like M. Night was actually trying to humble himself, learn from his mistakes, and do better. To give him credit, he did get better.
With The Visit, he completely changed what he was doing. The previous few movies he made had really high budgets, and I think at this point, he wanted to go back to the basics. A low-budget horror film. He was gonna slow down his role and really try. And to give the man credit, you can tell that he tried. I admire the fact that at this point, he was able to own up to his own flaws and make an active effort to be better. It only took you 9 goddamn years, but getting there is important. And I think there's something to be respected in that.
Would you mind getting inside the oven to clean it? What are you doing, step bro?
This movie, a lot of people called M. Night's return to form. If by return to form you mean better than his 4 movies combined, I guess I would agree. When you go from making 4 complete abominations in a row to making a movie that's just okay, I think everyone's gonna have a pretty positive response. It's impossible to go down from his previous 4 movies, or at least I hope.
With whom?
The Visit isn't a good movie, but it also isn't a terrible movie. It's just kind of lame. I don't personally get any entertainment value from it. The public's reaction to this movie was so insanely split that I get more entertainment value by watching completely contradictory reviews of this movie than I do from watching the actual movie.
But he's gonna have a few solid base hits. And The Visit is a solid base hit.
M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit is one of the most joyless experiences I've ever sat through.
And he has some truly good humor working through this movie, largely through the brother character. This kid is fantastic.
bother me because I'm not a sensitive bloke.
It was at this point where one of my friends in the theater turned to me and said, Adam, this is your fault.
He's parodying his self-seriousness, and a lot of that comedy really worked.
When you fail at comedy, it only makes things absolutely joyless. This is nothing but pain.
I wouldn't call The Visit a true return to form or anything. It wasn't a great movie by any standards. I wouldn't even call it good. But M. Night did make a great movie with Split.
You see, after releasing terrible movie after terrible movie, Split came out, and finally M. Night released his first good movie since Signs. Split is shockingly good. Split is basically about James McAvoy who kidnaps these 3 girls, and it seems really scary at first, but then when the 3 girls are in captivity, they realize that James McAvoy's character has dozens of different personalities, and some of the personalities are really nice and not intimidating at all, but other personalities are really dangerous and they're scared to be around him when they're those personalities. The main character, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, is honestly a really interesting character. She has a tragic backstory, and that helps her when she's in this setting, and seeing her try to outsmart James McAvoy, and by using all of the different personalities against each other to try to escape, is honestly really thrilling and tense. This movie is every bit as good as Signs, and it's honestly incredible to me that this movie even exists. A great M. Night movie came out in 2017. Another thing I love about this movie is the twist. You see, everyone knows M. Night has the reputation for a twist at this point, so I'm sure everyone was going into this movie expecting some kind of crazy twist to happen. And when you're watching the movie, the characters keep referencing a certain personality called the Beast. And you see, the Beast is supposed to be the super intimidating, terrifying personality. It's the final boss of all the different personalities. And this whole movie is fairly grounded in real life, and it doesn't really seem like it has any supernatural elements to it the entire time that you're watching. So the whole time you're watching, you're expecting that the twist is going to be that the Beast doesn't actually have any powers and that it was all a facade or something along those lines. But then the twist happens and you realize there's not actually a twist. The Beast actually is supernatural and has super strength, and that your expectations for some big plot-changing twist to happen were subverted because there was no twist. It's a really self-aware and genius thing for M. Night to incorporate in this movie, and I'm honestly so proud of him for it. It's really impressive to be that self-aware to pull this off. But this movie does have an actual twist. You see, at the end, the very, very end, literally, it's like a minute-long scene. There's some person in a diner who's watching this event happen on the news, and they're like, wow, this really reminds me of this thing that happened 20 years ago. And then right next to this guy is sitting Bruce Willis playing David Dunn, his character from Unbreakable. And it turns out Split and Unbreakable took place in the same universe the entire time, and you didn't even know the whole time you're watching this. And I'm sure to most normal people who don't pay attention to M. Night and just watched this movie had absolutely no idea what was going on. But as someone who binged watched every M. Night movie within 2 weeks, for me to see this, it was honestly really funny. I can see most people getting nothing out of this reveal, but to me it was fun. So, I guess M. Night is back and he's about to have his own Infinity War, right? Well, that's what I thought when I saw this movie for the first time when it came out. But as it turns out, M. Night wrote this movie back when he was still making good movies. And he only directed it in 2017. I don't know why. I don't know if he was out of ideas or just finally wanted to make this movie happen. I'm glad it did, but he wasn't really writing it in his new state. He had written it when he was still great. So maybe this is a fluke. Maybe it's not. I guess we'll find out.
later.
Glass is one of the most disappointing movies I've ever seen.
You gotta Salt Bay your ass. Salt Bay your ass.
What is that anyway?
It's an internet guy. He's a butcher who salts his meat in an elaborate way.
How do you do, fellow kids?
It's supposed to be this epic conclusion to the story of David Dunn and Mr. Glass and Kevin Wendell Crumb, but it just ends up being a boring mess that doesn't improve these characters at all. You watch this movie and absolutely nothing makes sense. Every time someone does something, you wonder, why the fuck did they do that? Like, in the beginning, the Beast kidnaps these 4 girls. David's son is helping him track them down, and he says that they were all kidnapped in these 3 locations making a triangle. And somehow, he comes to the conclusion that they're being held in some random factory that isn't even close to where they were kidnapped. How the fuck did you come to that conclusion? But then, David goes to that factory to try to save the girls, and it just turns out that he's right. How? Then David approaches these girls to save them, and he looks like a supervillain, and it obviously freaks them out. David, if you wanted to help them, why would you scare the living shit out of them before you do that? The first 15 minutes of this movie are so fast-paced that it'll give you whiplash. In 15 minutes, David tracks down the Beast, and they have their epic final battle. I thought this was what the entire movie was gonna be about, and it happens in 15 minutes, and their fight is just so lame, and it lasts like a minute long. The Beast literally gives David a bear hug, and then David just yeets them both out a window. Also, M. Night has a cameo here where he reprises his cameo character from Unbreakable. It's kinda cute. Then, the next hour and a half are just so goddamn slow, you wonder why they crammed all the potentially cool stuff in the first 15 minutes. The rest of the movie are just these 3 characters getting therapy sessions in a psych ward. This psychiatric ward and the staff take up so much of the runtime of this movie that we barely get to explore the 3 characters that we paid to see the conclusions of. I'm not exaggerating when I say that by the end of the movie, all 3 of these characters are completely ruined. Kevin Wendell Crumb is being held in this room, and somehow the psychiatric ward has a device that can make Kendall change personalities. All it does is flash a light, and then he changes personalities. I have a question. How did they perfect this machine that's designed for one specific person on the entire planet before they even met him? Also, why doesn't one of the smart personalities just close their eyes and walk out or something? This seems like the easiest thing to break out of. Also, for some reason, Anya Taylor-Joy's character is like his interpreter and he's in love with her or something. Why are these 2 friends? The last time they saw each other, they were trying to kill each other. But now they're friends? Then he just gets shot in the belly and dies. I love James McAvoy's performance here, but this character is just so poorly handled here. Mr. Glass doesn't say anything for the first half of the movie. Once he finally starts actually doing things and talking, it's kinda cool. He talks to Kevin and they escape, and that part's okay. But then he leaves and he has this master escape plan to reveal the existence of superheroes and then to die. Why does this master plan involve him dying? It's so unnecessary. Why is he even in this psychiatric ward in the first place? David Dunn and Kevin are here because they both are super strong and have superpowers and could potentially be dangerous to other people. But Mr. Glass is just really smart. His bones break super easily and he's literally in a wheelchair. Why can't he just be held in a prison? It's not like he can escape or anything, or hurt anyone there. Is it really necessary to give him therapy sessions? But the worst case of character assassination here is David Dunn. Firstly, remember how I praised Bruce Willis's acting like 40 minutes ago? Well, since then, Bruce Willis decided that he literally doesn't care about acting anymore. He can just show up and not put any effort into any of the roles that he gets and still be given enough money to buy whiskey anyway. So he sucks in every movie he's in now, and he sucks here. David Dunn in Unbreakable is literally the best character M. Night has ever written. The idea idea of seeing that character get a continuation is so exciting, but we never really see his character get continued. In Unbreakable, his arc is discovering that he has superpowers and then accepting his responsibility to use them to help others. In Glass, Sarah Paulson convinces him that he doesn't have superpowers in like a weekend, and then Mr. Glass convinces him that he actually does have superpowers in like one more conversation. M. Night, was this really the best you could come up with for this character in 19 years? Alright, so fun fact, this was actually the first movie I ever reviewed on my channel. I was in such an M. Night high back then, and I was so excited to do my first ever movie review that I gaslit myself into thinking this movie was perfect when I first saw it. And yes, I do mean perfect, because I gave this movie a 10 out of 10 in that review. This review was so bad that I later changed the title and description in case anyone later saw it out of sheer embarrassment. Hey Alec Baldwin, I'm such a big fan of yours and I'm so excited to work on a movie with you. Finally, we've made it up to Old. You see, after Split came out, I was so optimistic that M. Night could rebound and become good again and reclaim his old glory and respect. But after Old, I'm convinced that that's just never going to happen. Old reminds me so much of The Happening that I don't feel like M. Night learned anything in the last 13 years. Basically, this movie is about a few families that are on vacation and they all go on this beach, and on the beach everyone starts aging really quickly. The dialogue and acting in this movie is some of the worst in any M. Night movie. Every single actor is either underacting so much that they seem like they're on heroin,
Oh, damn.
or overact to the point where they seem like an Oscar reject.
Cal, wake up! Cal, wake up!
Man with the tattoos. He was gonna steal things.
Watching this movie gives me the distinct impression that M. Night has never spoken to a real human being.
You're always thinking about the future. It makes me feel not seen.
You're always thinking about the past. You work in a goddamn museum.
Who the fuck talks like that? But my favorite character in this movie is this dude. He's a rapper and just so happens to be the only black guy in the whole movie, and his rap name is Mid-Sized Sedan.
Oh my god! That's mid-sized sedan! What? He's a rapper! More Joe for the cooking?
How do you do, fellow
Hunt? His reactions to everything are so hilarious because he just makes himself look like a threat to all the other characters so often in perfectly avoidable ways. Also, the insane amount of gymnastics that this movie goes through to ensure that nobody leaves the beach is so stupid. It's not like rocks fall and there's no way for them to physically leave. It's just every time someone tries to leave the beach, they immediately pass out and somehow just wake up back on the beach. It's so bizarre. It's so poorly thought out. There's this one character who's just commentary on influencers, and it just sounds like some crotchety old man complaining about Instagram.
How do you do, fellow kids?
Also, there's this moment where one of the girls is in a bathing suit, and she starts off as a 9-year-old kid in this movie, but then she grows up while being on the beach and she becomes an adult, and her bathing suit fit her as an adult perfectly fine, but then her mom insists on her changing into a different bathing suit, but then the bathing suit she changes into is somehow even more revealing than the one she was in before, which makes me question what the point of that being in the movie even was. Also, all three of the actresses who play this one character have 3 different accents.
That's mid-sized sedan! I just need some time. We just got 3 days older while you held my face.
It's like you didn't even try. The amount of times that characters introduce themselves to each other is so funny. I get so much unironic joy from watching these characters introduce themselves to each other over and over again. It just feels like a college freshman icebreaker.
I'm a doctor. My wife has epilepsy. I'm a nurse. My name is Jared.
We're from Philadelphia. I want to break here with my wife and kids. That's them. I calculate people's insurance rates based on their risk profile. What's your name?
Mid-sized sedan.
And then there's this one scene where it feels like M. Night had to interject some crazy fetish of his, where you see two of the characters who were children at the beginning of the movie laying down together, and they, I guess, have sex because they're adults now, and the girl gets pregnant, and over the course of 5 minutes comes to full term with her pregnancy, gives birth, and then the baby dies. And then it seems like every character forgets that this happens for the rest of the movie. It's so bizarre, so unnecessary, that I don't understand what the point of this being here was. It felt like Quentin Tarantino adding foot shots to his movie. The first half of this movie was honestly a so bad it's good masterpiece. Literally almost as funny as The Happening. Everyone in the theater thought it was hilarious and were laughing out loud. No one, I swear, no one in the theater liked this movie. Even the characters in this movie don't like the fucking movie.
I don't like this dynamic at all.
But unfortunately, the second half of the movie isn't funny bad. It's just boring bad. This movie really takes a nosedive after Mid-Size Sedan dies. I guess he was just really carrying the movie. M. Night's cameo in this movie is that he's a bus driver who takes all the characters to the beach. The funniest thing about seeing M. Night in this movie is that he's the only actor in the whole movie who acts like a normal human being. It's like you're watching all these fake humans that seem like aliens in human costumes trying to pass as normal humans and just fail at it. And then M. Night talks in this movie and you see a real human being and it just wakes you up from your slumber. M. Night is the best actor in the whole movie. How sad is that? But the twist of this movie is hilarious. Basically, M. Night worked for the pharmaceutical company the whole time, and they bring diseased people to this beach so that they can test the long-term effects of medication on these people in a short amount of time. That's right. The villain of this movie the whole time was Big Pharma. Genius. Okay, I've seen every M. Night movie at least twice at this point, and I've reviewed all of them, so I think it's about time to rank them from best to worst, in order of how good the cameos are. First up, The Sixth Sense. He plays a doctor. That's a pretty good cameo. Next up is Glass. He plays both characters from the other movies combined. That's pretty funny. Old. He's a bus driver. That's pretty cool. Unbreakable. He's a stadium worker. That's a good cameo. Split. He's a tech wizard. That's also a good cameo. Signs. Starting the point of the backstory of the movie. That's pretty dumb. It's making him pretty self-important. Up next, The Happening. Joe's gonna fuck your husbands. Then next, The Village. Explaining the plot twist to the camera is a really bad cameo. And then worst of all cameos is Lady in the Water. It's so pretentious because M. Night basically makes himself the Messiah. Okay, alright, fine. That was a joke. Kind of funny. Alright, time to actually rank every M. Night movie in order of best to worst. In order of how good the plot twist is. Up first, there's The Sixth Sense. Bruce Willis is Ghost. That's pretty cool. And up next, there's Split. Sometimes no plot twist can be just as good as having a plot twist. Unbreakable. I'm still not going to spoil this one. Glass. It was government the whole time. That's pretty dumb. Old. It was Big Pharma the whole time. That's also pretty dumb. Signs. It was water the whole time. That's really dumb. The Visit. It's not actually their grandparents. This is so stupid that I kind of respect it. Up next is The Happening. What? No. The Village. Don't explain the twist to the audience. That's a really bad twist. That's the worst twist you've ever made. And then Lady in the Water, Avatar, and Laughter Earth don't actually have a twist. Okay. Did the joke twice. Not gonna do it a third time. So next is finally time to rank every one of his movies from best to worst, in order of how bangable the main character is. Up first, Glass. Bruce Willis is old is kind of a daddy. I'm kidding. I'll actually rank them by how good they are, from best to worst this time. Up first is The Sixth Sense. Obviously, it's a masterpiece. It's one of the best movies ever made. It's a 10 out of 10 movie. If you haven't seen it at this point, please go watch it. It's the reason we're all talking about M. Night to this day. Up next is Unbreakable, his second best movie. It's almost as good as The Sixth Sense. It's really, really underrated. I promise. Go watch it. It's amazing. It's another 10 out of 10 movie. Up next is Split. It's a really, really good thriller. I give it a 7 out of 10. Fourth is Signs. Now, Signs is a weird one. On some days I really like it and it's an 8. On other days I don't like it that much and it's a 6. Today it's a 7. I think it's a really good movie with a lot that's going for it. Go watch Signs. Up next is The Village. The Village is it's such a mixed bag. It's like a perfect 5 out of 10, as in there's so many technical things that are great, but then the story is just so nonsensically stupid and the plot twist is awful. and so is the cameo. Up next is Glass. It's just meh, really disappointing movie. I wish it was every bit as good as Split or Unbreakable, but it's just not. 5 out of 10. Up next is The Visit. The Visit also is just meh. It's a 4 out of 10. Now we're getting to the really, really dumb stuff. Lady in the Water. It's an absolute disaster. It's a 2 out of 10. What on God's beautiful earth was he thinking while making this movie? And then is Old. I can't believe M. Night just made one of his worst movies. I never thought he'd ever go back to being as bad as The Dark Ages, but Old is every bit as bad as those movies. It's a 2 out of 10. And then there's The Happening. We're getting into the really, really bad stuff now. The Happening is one of the funniest movies ever made, even if it wasn't trying to be. It's a 1 out of 10. Then The Last Airbender. Of course, The Last Airbender's in this category. It's a 1 out of 10. Also one of the worst movies ever made. I can't believe it exists in the first place. And the worst M. Night movie ever is After Earth. It's in this category as the worst movie he ever made by sheer nature of the fact that it is so boring. M. Night never makes boring movies. For a director that's always making very entertaining movies, regardless of whether or not they're good or not, After Earth is just not entertaining on any level. I did it.
I'm very used to kind of getting on a plane from the US, having been savaged by them, and then going to, like in this case, I went to Japan next, and then they're like, genius!
We can't just stand here as the uninvolved.
You know, you can lose your mind a little bit going on Saturday for being an idiot to Sunday being a genius, but it gives you perspective, you know.
That's mid-size sedan. It's a rapper.
You know, it's not my fight to fight. I'm the defenseless. It's the audience. That David played and pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do ya? It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah.
He called out for you. He called your name. Tiny stones out of behind a tree. It really hurt.
Oh my God! That's mid-size sedan. He's a rapper.
We were kids. There was no peanut allergy. Oh, he's allergic to peanuts. Ooh, what a weird kid.
It'll seem almost magically like the painting I saw is telling me something directly about this idea.
Then he'll sometimes make the worst movie you've ever seen in your entire fucking life with Avatar The Last.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. And it takes 20 years, 30 years, and everybody says, you stink, you're terrible. You spent all that time, all regret, your whole life is defined by your...
Thank you guys for watching episode 1 of Director Detective. I hope you liked it. It took me 4 months to make this video. It took me forever. I'm glad it's finally out. I hope it was worth the wait. One thing I expected when I started this video was to come away from it thinking of M. Night the same way everyone else does, which is a pretentious loser. But what I found was, after watching all these interviews with him and with people that worked with him and reading all these articles, based on all accounts, he's like a genuinely nice guy whose love for filmmaking is fascinating to listen to and is so intoxicating. He can go on for hours telling funny stories about film sets he did decades ago, and I think it's just really charming. The fact that we get to see a director try to portray unique visions, and on top of that being a really down-to-earth, in-touch human being, and be this famous at the same time is very rare, and I think that we should appreciate it. I came away with this video having way more respect for the guy than I expected to at the beginning of it. Also, if you guys liked that cover of Hallelujah, be sure to thank my friend Nick Perez Music for recording it to us, going over to his channel, give him a subscribe, thank him in the comments section, tell him I sent you. Let me know what other directors you think need busting in the comments section, and until next time, James Wan is next.